All Access Pete's Preseason is brought to you by these sponsors.
As the 2025 high school season is upon us in the high school red zone, expecting a lot of excitement on Channel 7 and the CW62. We're previewing 55 area teams either on the news or on our hour-long special on Saturday, the 16th of August at 7 p.m., and that show will also appear on the CW. And, of course, it all can be seen on WSPA.com, the different previews we do of the teams. But we're talking with coaches about a lot of things, and kind of join us a guy who really is Lakeland's football and Greenwood football through and through. Chris Liner, head coach of the Greenwood Eagles, a guy who played at Greenwood, coached just down the road at 96, coached just across the lake at Lawrence, and has been back at his alma mater now for better than half a decade. And Coach, thanks so much for coming in. And again, your journey includes the fact that generations before you and after you were involved with Greenwood football.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly I appreciate y'all doing this. This is awesome, and anytime we get a chance to talk about Greenwood football, I'm in, so I'm looking forward to it.
So the legendary Pinky Babb was the head coach there many years ago, and then longtime fans remember that. So what, your granddad and your dad both played for him? They
sure did, and I ended up coming in just a few years after Coach Babb retired. I think he retired in 1982, and played for Coach Willis Burkett, and and then my son just recently played for Greenwood for me. So it's been super cool to have a long bloodline of my family that were Greenwood Eagles.
And then you got to work under a legend, Shell Dula, for a time during your career before you took the job at 96. And I know that was probably quite the experience and maybe helped with your foundation as a coach.
Absolutely. If you'd have told me at 21 years old that I'd be a high school football coach, I'd have probably laughed. I was at Clemson. I was majoring in civil engineering. I loved football and loved my time playing football, but I didn't really see myself doing this. But I was fortunate enough to meet Coach Dula at a very, kind of impressionable but critical time in my life. And honestly, without him, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. The reason that I've done pretty much anything, successful as far as a coaching standpoint has been because of him.
We had another coach who said the plan for him was going to be chemical engineer, so he ended up getting into coaching. So there you go. The paths can take you here in lots of different ways. From Greenwood High, and you were part of some great teams there. Let me get your, as an assistant coach, first off, your lineage there, would that have included the turn of the century state champions or a little bit later, maybe later in Coach Dula?
No, I started there with Coach Dula in 1997.
So you got there then, yeah.
And I was there all the way to 2008. So I started out as DB's coach, moved to wideouts, and then worked with a couple big time. I wouldn't call them legendary. Well, I would call them legendary, but Lee Sawyer was our defensive coordinator at the time, who went on to do some great things at Strom Thurmond, and Gene Cathcart was our offensive coordinator. And obviously came back to Greenwood, won a state title, and then when he moved on to Presbyterian College in 2001, I became the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, and held that title for a long time, and was fortunate enough to be part of a lot. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I was talking to our AD today, Michael Hudson, who was on that staff, and we had a kid just commit to University of South Carolina a couple of days ago, and I said, we call him Sparky. I said, Sparky, remember the time when that was just kind of old hat? People around the school today were just bustling with the news of, we've got a P5, well, I guess P4 now recruit, and at one time that was just normal, I mean, it happened all the time. I mean, I could name, 25 guys right off the top of my head that were in that category. So, but working for Coach Dula and being an assistant there was a blessing. Certainly prepared me for the next journeys at 96 and Lawrence. And it's kind of funny because he used to be the head coach at 96 and he was from Lawrence. So, again, when I told you what I told you earlier, I wasn't kidding. The reason I became the head coach in 96 was because him, and I'm sure he had a hand in the Lawrence job as well. So it was super cool.
Couple of thoughts on that first, just because you were there from the time Coach Dula arrived from the old Union High to take over Greenwood. I want to say every guy who played quarterback, or at least regularly was a starter, got a D1 scholarship under Coach Dula, starting with Mark Logan. Sam Williams was in there. One of the guys you had to play quarterback, I think, played DB at Marshall, but, you had a guy go on to Furman. DJ Swearinger played a lot of Wildcat, I think, coaches last year. You might have been at 96 by then.
No, I was still there.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting. Every guy got a D1 scholarship who played quarterback at Greenwood for Shell Dula.
For a long time, and again, Gene coached Mark Logan, but from the Sam Williams point forward, that was me. And, I'd love to sit here and tell you that, it was Sam Williams, Zarek Matthews, who went to Marshall. Ronaldo,
that's who I was thinking of, Zarek
Ronaldo
Matthews.
Gray, who ended up starting at quarterback at Furman. Armani Edwards, obviously most people
pretty
know
good quarterback.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And, even a kid, Christian Powell, who started at quarterback for me, ended up being a big-time pitcher for College of Charleston. Jay Spearman, was the next quarterback and ended up signing at South Carolina and playing DB down there. So we had 7 straight Division I, quarterbacks. Now, not all of them played quarterback in college. And, at 28 years old, I really thought that I had arrived. And if he played quarterback, why not come play from Greenwood? Because we had that kind of – QBU, all these colleges do that now, DBU, wide receiver U. And, and I look back on it, it really didn't have a whole lot to do with it. God just blessed them with a ton of talent, and I was fortunate enough to be their position coach. So, but it was super cool to be part of that. And, again, when you look back on it with a little more wisdom, you realize that the talent was there and, they overcame their coaching at times.
Tristan Lewis was the guy you were referring to who recently committed to South Carolina, rising senior quarterback for you, and they're going to play him at DB, safety. As soon as I saw that, I thought of Jay Spearman, because I remember he committed to South Carolina, but as a DB, even though he was a really good quarterback, led you guys, I think, to one of your state titles.
He did.
Yeah, hurt his wrist around the state championship week, as I recall, but still forged on through. The other thing I was going to say, so you mentioned Gene Cathcart. You and I may have talked about this when I was down at a practice doing a preview, and I told you about a story he told us for a feature we did on the 10 best teams in my now 35 years at Channel 7 programs that I've witnessed. And he told this great story from one of your state title runs. It involved a game at home against Wilson High from over in Florence. And you were, I don't know if you were upstairs on the headphones or you on the sidelines, but I always love the fact that Coach Dula, with about a minute and change to go and you guys down, said, we're going to punt it, we're going to get it back. Do you remember that particular game?
Oh, I talk about that game quite often. That was Mark Logan's senior year, and he had already committed to Georgia Tech. And, I don't know what it was. I think there was a little rift between Coach Page and Coach Dula at the time. Coach Dula was actually the Shrine Bowl coach that year.
Yeah.
And we did not take Darian Durant. And he had just missed the first 8 games. He had broke his leg early in the season, and Coach just didn't think it was fair to include someone that really hadn't played his senior year. And for whatever reason, at the end of the game, they threw it twice and ran out of bounds. And I remember we had turned the ball over, and Coach Cathcart was on the sideline, kind of consoling Mark, and I'm standing there. I teach math, so. I'm standing on the sideline thinking, holy crap, we're going to get the ball back, because they just threw an incompletion and we only had like one timeout. And I remember running over there and grabbing Gene by his neck, literally the collar of his shirt, and dragging him back to the sideline and saying, Bo, we're about to get the ball back. This guy, I guess, was trying to prove a point. And I don't know. I have no idea what was going on that sideline, but I know it gave us Greenwood a chance to win, and we sure enough did. We came back with just a few seconds left to go, and and ended up beating Aiken for the first state championship Greenwood had in 23 years. So that was a big deal.
Years and years. So on the front of that story, apparently, as the story goes from Cathcart, is that Shell is on the sidelines, and Shell just had this certain demeanor on the sidelines, and fourth down comes up, and as Cathcart tells, he's like, we got to go for it, and Shell says punt. And apparently Gene, in his words, says, then we're going to lose, and then apparently he retreats back to console Logan. Sorry about that. And then one thing led to another, and it was the stoic Shell Dula who I guess got the last laugh in that decision.
He loved to tell the OC when it was time to punt, and I experienced it numerous times. And he would get right up in your face, and he would put his fingers just like this, and he would say, match. And and of course, Gene would get all over himself. And not that I'm not hyperactive at times, or a little crazy as well, but I took it a little better than he would.
Sure, no, absolutely.
And it was kind of comical. We used to love it. We'd see it coming, and half the time it was something we had screwed up.
Yeah.
We'd called some ridiculous play against the coverage that wouldn't work or whatever. But
sure.
It was that was a lot of fun.
Folks, so folks watching this, if they go to Facebook, because those features I did the 10 best teams programs in the 30 years, and it was based on a lot of things. But anyway, if they go back, you can find that story. You'll see Gene tell that story, and it's interesting now having you, Chris, give your perspective.
Boy.
Something I've noticed from your time at 96 through Lawrence and Greenwood, you are often looking at college-level offenses and then seeing how you can adapt it. And we talked about it recently in the preview that folks can see on our other platforms for your team this year. What is it that when you evaluate, because for a while you were doing some Georgia Southern stuff at Lawrence, and I think in 96, I don't remember what, but now at Greenwood you're going to be doing a little bit different because, again, you got this pillar of a guy, a quarterback, you got a lot of talent around it. But what are some of the ways that you as an offensive-minded coach filter out what you see and then how you apply it to your program?
Well, I think that to me is one of the keys to high school coaching. And we're situated in an area, we're 35 miles from the nearest interstate. So, we have zero transfers, and, we just have to take what's in our building and find a way to make that work. And in every year that changes. I mean, you may have a 6'4", 200-pound kid like the one we have now. And when we first came back to Greenwood, we had a 5'6", 160-pound kid that, the flex bone was kind of something that he could do. And I think that's a challenge, but it's also a lot of fun. You know? I mean, we spent hours upon hours literally in Statesboro learning how to do it. And, I used to go to App all the time. I've been pretty much every school you can name. I have been there somehow, some way, playing 20 questions with their coaches, trying to steal some stuff, find some stuff that would help us win. And that's the part of me about offensive coaching. It's so much fun is, you can build a system and recruit to that system. Maybe, if you're not recruiting to that system, which is what most people do now, you can start with your park and rec in your middle schools, is what Coach Bentley did at Burns. And a lot of, Coach Nichols does that at Abbeville. They have those guys, trained from 5 years old up to where, they don't have a lot to do when they get there other than refine it once they get to the high school level.
Sure.
That's a lot harder for us. We're a 2 high school district, which, did not exist when I was growing up. I mean, there was no Emerald. So, but that makes it a little bit harder because we kind of shear athletes from different middle schools. And, it would not be, it wouldn't be right of me, first of all, but it would be really hard for me to go to really any of our middle schools and say, I need for you to run this, and this.
Yeah. Because
some of those kids aren't coming to us. And so, we try to, we've changed this year. We're going to do a lot of Tennessee stuff, a lot of up-tempo, fast stuff, but it kind of fits our personnel. And, I love doing that. That, to me, that's my, other than the relationships you build with players and, really everybody in the football family, that's, to me, the most fun part of coaching is to, learn, constantly learn and bring that home and teach it to the kids. And, they love it too because they see it on Saturdays. And, I'll tell them, I mean, I didn't invent this. We stole this from, I talked to Darrell Sims, who's the running back coach at Tennessee, one day standing in Dick's Sporting Goods in Lexington for an hour about how they do their tempo stuff. And, it's just fun. And when football quits being fun, it's time for somebody else to do it. So we'll continue to do that as long as I'm still there.
Well, that's great. It's been a great ride for you so far. You've got a team to keep an eye on, and defensively you're going to be as good as you are on offense. Good luck to you in the season ahead. Thanks for coming in, Coach. And Chris Liner and the Greenwood Eagles, I have a feeling they're going to be playing way deep into the playoffs, maybe holding up that trophy. But good luck this season, Coach.
Thank y'all very much.
All Access Pete's Preseason is brought to you by these sponsors.
Welcome back in as we continue to visit with area high school football coaches, the 2025 season. An exciting one ahead in area high school football. In the High School Red Zone, we'll have you wall-to-wall every Friday night on Channel 7 and the CW62. Leading up to the season, we're previewing all the area teams on the news and also at WSPA.com, and on Saturday, August 16th on Channel 7 at 7 p.m., our hour-long High School Red Zone season preview show. When you think of high school football in our area, at least in my mind, front front and center, one of the blue blood programs, not only in our area, but the state, and to me, the entire Southeast and the nation, the Gaffney Indians. Their first-year head coach, Donnie Littlejohn, kind of joined us here in the studio. And the name Littlejohn is synonymous with Gaffney. Before we came on the air, we were talking about the origins of that last name in the Gaffney area and then down Highway 18 in Union. But so your Littlejohn kin is originally from Union, Donnie, but here you are, longtime Gaffney guy, played for the Indians, longtime coach, and here you are in your first year as a head coach. So what's the first several months of that process been like?
Well, it's been extremely exciting. Yes, this has been a dream come true for me to, take over as the head coach at Gaffney, my alma mater. Super excited about that. You think it had been an easy transition, but it hadn't been an easy transition. But it has been a fun transition, and I'm super excited about this upcoming season.
You played for a guy named Joe Montgomery, one of my favorite coaches all time to cover. He and I would do an interview during the week after practice or before practice looking at a game, and then we'd talk for about 45 minutes after that. You had some very good teams on either side of you. You had teams that either won state titles or barely lost them, and then right after you wrapped up, another state title. But what was your time like playing at the old reservation for such a legendary program? What are some memories from your playing days coming out of that tunnel at the reservation at Gaffney?
Well, of course, I played at the old reservation, what's now the middle school now. And, I was one of the few people that were blessed to be hired by their head coach and play for their head coach. So, of course, Coach Montgomery coached me, but he was also my first employee.
Oh, wow.
He hired me back in 2002 to coach tight ends and the JV offensive line. So I was excited to get that phone call. It was just great memories. I played back in 96 would have been the football season with Dominique Stevenson and Marcus Littlejohn and Greg Price and some of those guys, who are synonymous with Gaffney football. Just a great time, Anytime you're in Gaffney, whether you're a coach or a player, there's an opportunity to be successful. And I just hope we can continue that tradition.
Yeah, I bet you wish you had a quarterback like Kentrell Jones, but I know you got a good one this year, a guy who's already committed to Arkansas, and that'll be exciting as you get set for another season with Gilmore behind center for you. But in terms of your time as a Gaffney player, and as they say, if you grew up in Gaffney and you have any kind of athleticism, you're going to eventually play football for the Indians. But was that one of those kind of romantic situations where growing up playing youth football, you knew eventually you'd be wearing the Vegas gold and black for the Indians?
Well, I don't know if when you talk to my former coaches, if they're going to use the word athleticism when it comes to me. I tell Coach Jones all the time that, he kind of crushed my dreams because when I got to Gaffney as a freshman player, of course, I thought I was a quarterback because I played quarterback from Little League through middle school. Not a very good quarterback, but I still played the position. But absolutely, my dad played at Gaffney. I got a lot of cousins that played at Gaffney. And, growing up, you always want to run out of tunnel and wear the black and gold. And I was no different as a young tight. My mom was on the band and just, black and gold ran through our blood or runs through my blood. So,
Yep.
Of course, growing up as a youth, I wanted to, of course, run out of tunnel and be a part of this great tradition.
I covered Gaffney for many years in the old reservation, and frankly, I think the new reservation has been a great home now for coming up around 20 years. Beautiful stadium, great facility. There is the aura of the team running out of the tunnel, which to me is still a great sight. And I think as best you could take a tradition from one stadium to the other, they've done that. So you wrap up, you graduate high school in '97. What was your next chapter in your journey from there?
I was blessed because of my mom's push and her drive when it comes to academics, I guess, and combined with a little bit of my dad's ability to play sports, to receive a scholarship to Furman University. And so I attended Furman University from 1997 to 2002. I was blessed to be a part of some great teams at Furman, under the Bobby Johnson era. Great coaches on that staff, such as Bobby Lamb and Bruce Fowler. And, of course, Clay Hendricks, who's the head coach at Furman now. He was my offensive line coach while I played at Furman. So I was blessed to be a part of that. We played for a national championship back in 2001, I think. That game I still can't watch. We lost to Montana.
Yep.
The Grizzlies up in Chattanooga.
Yep.
It's been a long time, and I still can't watch that game. Won a couple of Southern Conference championships while I was there. Just a great time. And I was blessed, again, to be around some fantastic football players while I was at Furman. You know, some great guys who I still keep in contact with to this day.
Yeah, you lost 13-6 to a Montana team that was as big and thick as any FCS team I've ever seen on a really chilly December night in Chattanooga. That was Bobby Johnson's final game, and that was probably your final game since you graduated in 2002. And, boy, I thought Furman could pull the upset that night at that stadium in Chattanooga. But that was a heck of a Montana team that you guys hung in there with. Tell me something about the Furman days, because Bobby Johnson takes over for Jimmy Satterfield in '94. The program had fallen off of its national championship level. He did a really nice job rebuilding it. So you were front and center in the rebuilding and then the success, because there were some FCS playoff trips before that 2001 run to the championship game.
Well, I don't know about front and center. I was part of it. I was blessed to be a part. Like I said, I played with some great guys during that time. Of course, Lewis Ivory, who set all kind of records. Will Boughton, you know, was an All-American while he was there. You know, I played with an offensive lineman some offensive linemen within Marty Peory and Chris Stewart, Ben Hall, Stephen Kane, Trevor Kruger, some of those guys who were fantastic. Our defense was really good during that time. You know, Rodney Johnson and John Thrift, and, you know, just a plethora of guys that I got the opportunity to play with. I played with Dez Kitchens. Billy Napier was the quarterback during that time. Justin Hill, a Greer native, he was my quarterback for a little while. So I was blessed to be around some great guys who love football and who actually loved each other, which I think was the reason for some of our success, the chemistry of those guys. And, you know, a lot of those guys I still talk to on a normal or a daily basis even now.
You would have been at Gaffney in the fall of 2002, but it was probably tough for you on that October Saturday to look up and see how things ended in the Furman game at Appalachian State in Bobby Lamb's first season. Billy Napier will always have that. You know, it's interesting. Billy Napier was Dabo Sweeney's first offensive coordinator at Clemson, and his first defensive coordinator was Kevin Steele. Mm-hmm. And in 2003, Kevin Steele's the head coach at Baylor, mm-hmm. and they've got a 6-point lead on UNLV. And they're going to go in and add to that lead. Baylor's got the ball in like the last 10 seconds of the game, and they're on like the UNLV 2 or 3 yard line. They hand it off to a guy. He fumbles. UNLV scoops it, scores it, takes it the other way, and beats Baylor by a point because they just didn't freeze the ball, you know, take a knee at the end of the game. So you had Billy Napier with that crazy play up at App State when they did the right thing and went for 2 with a 1-point lead, and then that flipped that game around. And then Kevin Steele. I just always found it fascinating that 2 guys with 2 of the most involved in 2 of the most infamous plays in college football within a year of each other were on the same Clemson staff. But I digress. So you get done at Furman, and again, those were really some great teams around the turn of the century. And Lewis Ivory, I was doing sidelines for a regular season game in November in the rain. I'm pretty sure it was 2001 when he either set a Furman record or maybe a SoCon record. It was an amazing game. But I'll always remember the Saturday before you went and played on a Friday in Chattanooga for the title, a win at Georgia Southern on a sunny day, and I was doing sidelines on a telecast for that. But you have some specific memories from that game, because nobody in the world thought Furman was going to go down to Statesboro and knock off Georgia Southern.
Well, I'm not going to say nobody in the world. There was a group of guys in Greenwood,
outside of your locker room. Outside of your locker room.
That felt pretty good about that game that day. But absolutely, you know, and it's funny, Marty Peory, who was my left guard at the time, he lives in Cincinnati now. We actually kind of texted about that game a couple of days ago, or maybe a couple of weeks ago, and just reliving some of those memories and how hard of a fought game that was. I didn't realize how one-sided the game was that first half. You know, Georgia Southern gave us all we needed. Yeah. I don't remember what was said in the locker room. You know, those memories are kind of vague. You know, some of the players or some of my buddies tell the story a little different. But I remember coming back in the second half, or we talked about coming back in the second half and really buckling down and kind of, that's where we kind of won the game, the third and fourth quarter. And I just remember the excitement, playing in Georgia Southern at that time was a great atmosphere. Those people are passionate about their football in Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
And so I just remember going down and, again, to snap that winning streak. I think it was one of the longest in the country at the time.
It was their home stadium, at Paulson Stadium, yeah.
And so to go down there and win that game, I just remember, getting on the bus and, exhausted, but super excited about, pulling that upset out that day.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a heck of a ball game. I'll never forget how it was such a sunny, beautiful day in early December down in Statesboro. But what a win. That was one of the great Furman wins I've ever seen. So just kind of in a nutshell, you've made the jump. For many years, you were the offensive coordinator at Gaffney. Most head coaches say that the responsibilities change, but you told me in a preseason interview we did that we'll see on the news on Channel 7 that you've got to now be more of a CEO. How's that going in terms of adjusting after replacing a very legendary head coach in his own right in Dan Jones?
Well, I think it's going well. I mean, I guess you have to actually engage the staff to see how well I'm doing. I get a grade from our strength coach every other day, depending on how happy I make him. I think I'm at a C- now. I may be at a C+, today. Depends on what's going on. But, it's a different role. Still the same expectations, still, hoping that we can, put a product on the field that people are proud of and, of course, be playing the first Saturday or Friday, whenever the high school league decides that state championship game is in December. And, to add number 19 to our collection. So just it's different, but I'm excited about it.
And just real quick, they moved the Bob Prevett statue from Limestone over to Gaffney, from what I understand. Is that correct?
It is. It's that, with the closing of Limestone College, the statue has found, Coach Prevett statue has found a home at the reservation, and we couldn't be more excited about that statue being put up at the reservation.
Because when you mentioned going for number 19 state championships, Bob Prevett, the legendary coach from way back in the day, was the guy who really started that great tradition. And Donnie Littlejohn's going to try to continue it with the Gaffney Indians. Coach, thanks so much for coming in. There is no better atmosphere in the country on a Friday night than the reservation in Gaffney, and some of the great games that I've seen in all my years here have involved the Gaffney Indians. Such a great place for you to coach, and just a great town and a great community for high school football. Thanks so much, Coach. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.